to lesson 3 of our planets series, looking at the music of Gustav Holst and the planets, and also thinking about how the names of the planets have been used for other things, so Roman gods, and also looking at the planets themselves. We have so much to do again this week, so much. So let's start thinking about what we're going to need for today's lesson. First of all, if you have got them, and it's it's up to you whether you print these off, but if you have the worksheet, that would be great, which has got everything on that you need to do with today's lesson. It's all got all the activities in there as well. It's downloadable as a PDF from the website, but it's also accessible as JPEGs off of Facebook. So those worksheets are there if you would like to use them. But as I say every week, you don't have to have them. If you just have a pencil or pen and a piece of paper, you can join in with everything that we're doing today. And then if you decide later on that you want to go and get those activity sheets, that's absolutely fine. Now, part of today's lesson is all about technology, music technology, and how technology has changed. And we've had a bit of change to technology this week as well, because we've got a new camera that I'm testing out. So if the camera is working brilliantly, you let me know. If you're not sure whether this camera is better than the old one, let me know, because obviously we're trying to make sure that, we keep up to date and we've got the best for you to be able to access these lessons. Okay. Already given you a little bit of a heads up as to what we're going to maybe start with. We are going to, and this is the first time Theatre of Music has done this, we're going to listen to a live orchestra playing today. We're actually going to listen to the third movement, or the start of the third movement, certainly, of the Planet Suite by Gustav Holst. You can see we have our little picture of Gustav Holst there in the corner. But we're using a real recording. And normally I create the recordings for you. The reason we can use this is because it's what we call in the public domain. It's such an old recording that it's out of copyright. And this recording is from 1923, 102 years ago. And what makes this even more special is that it is actually Gustav Holst, the composer himself, who is conducting the orchestra. That's quite special, because it means that you're listening to the piece of music exactly as Gustav Holst would have wanted you to have heard it. So at the speed that he would have wanted, orchestrated how he wanted it. So we know that this is as close as possible, and I'll explain why as possible in a minute. It's as close as possible to as accurate a recording of exactly what Gustav Holst wanted and could hear in his head when he wrote this as possible. So we're going to have a little listen to this. And as you're listening to it, I want you to think about how you can tell this is an old recording. What are the big clues that tell us that it's an old recording? And how it might differ from modern recordings that you might listen to. So write down some ideas about how you think this is different, how it sounds different. What are the clues, the giveaways that this is an old recording? Okay, so let me get out of the way so I'm not putting you off whatsoever. And I'm going to play you the beginning of Mercury the Winged Messenger from 1923, recording with Gustav Holst conducting. Okay, get down your ideas. Think about what you've just heard. Think about how that is very different to what you would expect to hear from a modern recording, if you were listening to a modern recording. Now, let's have a little think about this and see if you've come up with some of the ideas that I've got. So first of all, you can hear a lot of crackling on the record, and that's because it is an actual record, what you might refer to as vinyl. But back then in 1923, when you cut a record, it wasn't put onto vinyl. It was like a type of resin that you would use, that it would be recorded on, and it's made of something called shellac, which is this kind of resin. So first of all, what you're playing it on is very different. And actually, if you play vinyl records even today, sometimes you'll get like a little crackle background noise as it's going, the needle is going around on the record. There's something very lovely about vinyl. The old records were recorded at a very different speed. So back then they had records that were called 78s, and that means 78 revolutions per minute. So it's how often the record goes round and round. Singles, small vinyls, go round at 45, and albums, which are the bigger vinyls that we use, go round at 33 revolutions per minute. So 78 revolutions per minute. They were going around quite fast. There's the first thing. So it's made of something very different. We're not listening to it like on a streaming device or anything like that. It was on a record. The recording method is very different. So if you think about modern recording methods, I mean, I'm going to just pick it up here. I have a microphone and I'm talking into my microphone and it's recording the sound and it's all very electronic. However, back in the day, back in 1923, that hadn't been invented. They didn't have microphones. What they had was this enormous, giant horn-shaped thing made of metal that the sound would be gathered into and funneled into this metal horn. So you could have one that was almost like half the size of your room. There were different sizes depending on what sort of sounds they wanted to produce. And the sound would be funneled into it. At the end, there would be something called a diaphragm, which sort of a thin thing that collects the sound waves and it bounces the sound off. And it's connected to a stylus, which would then etch the sound waves into a blank wax rotating cylinder or disc to actually record the sound. So there's no control over the tone. There's no control over the sounds. You can't adjust the sounds. You can't make instruments louder than other instruments. You can't give it a bit more bass or anything like that, which you can do with all modern recording techniques now. If something was slightly out of tune, there's a lot of audio adjustment that goes on in modern records. If somebody's slightly out of tune, they will just pitch correct it. Can't do that. Back then, it's what you heard was what you recorded. You couldn't have a second go because you're recording it on this wax disc. So if somebody makes a mistake, that's it. It's there forever. You get one crack at this and you just go with one complete recording. You couldn't stop. So when it came to recording the Planet Suite, each of the planets was recorded on a different wax cylinder, and they were recorded at different times. It just so happens that Mercury was recorded in the August of 1923, 102 years ago. Now, the conductor was Holst, so it is exactly how he wanted it to be played as far as the tempo was concerned. And when you listen to all of the planets from this sort of 1922 to 24 period when he recorded these, they're all a lot quicker than modern orchestras play the Planet Suite. He played it much, much quicker, all of them, which makes you think maybe we're sort of, modern sensibilities, we're sort of pulling things around a little bit more than Holst maybe intended back at the beginning of the 20th century. We know from the last couple of weeks when we've been talking about the orchestra, how big this orchestra was for these planets. I mean, when we're talking about the Mars piece, there were 100 players in that orchestra. 100 players. You couldn't get 100 players in to record this. There was no way that you were going to get that number of players in. they'd only got a small room to actually record it in. So the orchestra size had to be reduced to enable them to do the recording. And that meant that you know, obviously certain instruments you perhaps didn't hear as well as you might have done. The dynamics couldn't be as dramatic either, because you could hear on the recording there is some distortion. So it's when the sound it's so loud, it's sort of fuzzing up and it becomes distorted. That's because they had to sort of keep it in a very narrow range. So dynamics couldn't be dramatic. So the quiets couldn't be too quiet, because if they did that, you wouldn't be able to hear them because of all the background noise. And they couldn't be too loud, because that would have caused the distortion. This is 1923. Amazingly, only 2 years later, so 100 years ago, they started to use microphones and mixers and amplifiers to record sound. That was introduced in 1925. And this made what this is called the acoustic method of recording obsolete, because at that point, people wanted to go over to using the microphone method, the electronic method. And you can sort of see why that would be the case, because the recording quality would be better. Modern techniques, everything's computerized. Everything is done on a computer. Amazing advancements in the 100 years that we've had, and how sound is recorded and gathered. You can have very specific mics now. When you're in an orchestra and you're being recorded, everybody is sort of mic'd up. Each section is mic'd up. You'll have microphones over the top. You'll have microphones standing as well. You will particular instruments may be mic'd slightly more than other instruments. It's the whole technique is very different because of the advancements that they've had. Holst's daughter said that recording this, I'm going to read the quote. Holst's daughter said that recording this album, Holst found the most exhausting job he'd ever had to do, for the large orchestra was crowded into a comparatively small room. The string players were unable to draw their bows to full length of a crescendo, and the superb horn player broke down 13 times at the beginning of Venus from the sheer discomfort of not having enough air to breathe. That just makes you sort of conscious of how they were all just squeezed in to get this recording done, and how uncomfortable a process it probably was, and stressful, because you know you've got to get it done in one go. All quite, you know, wow. So we will come back to this music again. We will have another listen to it, because it's great to be able to hear live musicians, albeit 102 years ago and on a crackling recording. It doesn't matter. Those performers were playing that piece of music how it was intended to be heard at that time. And recordings like that were the only way that some people were going to get to hear this sort of piece of music, which is just, I mean, it's astounding, 102 years ago. Anyway, let's move on and actually have a look at Mercury, the Roman god, and think about how the music reflects the character, because that's what we are sort of going to be looking at next. So Mercury, our Roman god, he is the god of shopkeepers, merchants, travelers, thieves, and tricksters. He's got quite a lot of jobs there, but that's not the sum total of his jobs either. He's often identified with the Greek god Hermes. It's amazing how often the Greek god and the Roman god are basically the same character. They have the same characteristics. They look the same. And we'll come across that again next week when we look at Jupiter. He's the chief messenger of the gods. And what I also should have said was he's the many similarities. Well, let's just have a look at the picture of Mercury there. He's got the winged sandals. He's got the winged cap, and he's carrying the staff. So that's the link, sort of the look with Hermes. He is the chief messenger of the gods. He was also responsible for conveying souls to the underworld. And he was the link between the gods and humankind, basically. His name probably emerged from the Latin merx, a noun that means merchandise. So we've got that Latin link. He wore winged shoes and a winged helm that was forged for him by Vulcan, who was the Roman god of forge and fire. And he carried a staff that was wound with serpents. You can see the serpents there on his staff that was gifted to him by Apollo. The staff represents trade and negotiations. And his significant festivals include and I'm going to struggle with this because I really struggle with some of these words. Mercuralia, I think is how it's pronounced, which is celebrated on the 15th of May. Okay, so Mercury, our winged messenger, because he is the chief messenger to the gods, we can see that he's going to be darting around. He's going to be very quick on his feet. He's going to be flying off to pass these messages on from Jupiter to whoever it might be that he wants to get a message to. Very, very busy. So let's go back to the music and have a think about the music. We're going to listen to the opening of the piece again. Now, we came across a couple of these keywords last week, and I'm hoping that if you were with us last week, you will have remembered what these words mean. If you weren't with us last week, have a guess, because I will explain what the words mean when we go through the answers. So, is the tempo for this piece of music allegro? Is it vivace? Or is it andante? So that's our first question. Think about the tempo. Tempo is speed. Is it allegro, vivace, or andante? The second question, this is quite tricky because it is a grainy old recording, but you can hear them. Name 2 percussion instruments you can hear playing. Percussion instruments, remember, are instruments that you hit with beaters or sticks or with your hands. Okay? How does Holst use this music to describe the god Mercury? What in the music helps to portray the character of Mercury that we've just been talking about? Let's have a listen. Okay, so we'll have a listen just to the same amount of music again. The full recording is on the on the website under the live lessons and resources. Okay, so here we go. Okay, I think that's plenty for us to get our answers to the question. So, first question, is the tempo allegro vivace or andante? Allegro means fast. Andante means walking pace. So, you could say, well, it's fast, it's an allegro. It's actually vivace, very fast. And if you think about the way that you say vivace, vivace. It gives that feeling of really fast. So the tempo, vivace. Name 2 percussion instruments that you can hear. We came across these 2 percussion instruments last week, so I didn't want to say that in case you just thought, oh, I remember what they were. It was a glockenspiel and a celeste, which is like a keyboard instrument. Okay. How does Holst use the music to describe the god Mercury? Well, straight away, the tempo is very fast-paced like Mercury, very lively, playful, energetic. More instruments get add to the drama. It increases the dynamic. There's lots going on. It's very, very busy. It's a very busy whisking through, going from one spot to the other, moving around. And then you have this melodic idea that's actually repeated 12 times in total. Does that 12 times. 12 times. That repetition. Maybe that's, the repeated idea of Mercury is sort of repeating tasks, scooting from one message to the next. It's the shortest of the 7 movements. Now, you wouldn't know that because we've not heard the whole thing, but it is the shortest of the 7, which I think is important for you to know. It's only just over 3 minutes long, between 3 and 4 minutes. It's quite short. The rest are sort of like 7, 8 minutes long. And the time signature for this is 6/8, and that gives it a bit of a bounce and a bit of energy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But it's not as simple as that, and we're going to have a look at that in a second. So it's very clever. He's very clever. I think Holst was an incredibly clever man. The way that he's put all of this together to create this sort of movement. Let's have a look at this very clever thing that he's doing with rhythm. Cross rhythm. It doesn't mean it's angry. It means layered rhythmic patterns in different meters. That sounds incredibly complicated. I assure you it isn't. So, if we look at the time signature, we can see that the time signature is 6/8. We are counting 6 quavers in a bar. And you can see that I've written the clarinet part out there. And you can see the 6 quavers in each bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? I want you to sort of say that with me. And I want you to put an emphasis on the 1 and the 4. Okay? So let's do that together. After 5, 4, 5, 6. And we'll come in together. Ready? 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, the reason that's important is because that's sort of the beat. That's where we put the emphasis when we're counting. If we were conducting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're sort of counting it in 2. All right, 6 quaver beats and we're counting it in 2. And that's something that we've come across before during Peer Gynt and everything. We did it earlier on in this project as well. So we know about that. If we have a look at the harp part, which is written underneath the clarinet part, it looks like it's written in 3/4. There are 3 crotchet beats in a bar, 3 1-beat notes. And when we're counting in 1-beat notes, we would be going 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. 3/4 has the same number of quavers as 6/8 because there are 2 quavers to every crotchet. So if we've got 3 crotchets, 3 times 2 is 6. But when we're counting, we wouldn't be putting the emphasis like we are in the clarinet part, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Have a go at saying that with me. Ready? After 4, 5, 6. 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Now, what I'd like you to do is count the 6 8. So you're going to go 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6. And while you're doing that, I'm going to count the crotchets, the 1 2 3 4 5 6, and have a listen to how the two fit together. Okay, so you have a go at your 6 8. I'll start us all off with the 4 5 6, and you carry on with the 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, and I will do my rhythm over the top. Okay, here we go then. 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6. What we've created there is a cross rhythm. So you are performing 6 8, 1 2 3 4 5 6, and I'm performing 3 4, 1 2 3 4 5 6. And the two rhythms together create this layered effect and make what we call cross rhythms. Okay, so it sounds complicated, but actually it's not as complicated as it seems. Well, I don't think it is. It's just a case of how you count, whether you're counting in 6 8 or whether you're counting in 3 4. Okay, now just to make it a little bit more complicated, because obviously, you know, I can't help myself, we've got another example here of a cross rhythm. And I'm not going to expect you to count this one because this one is a little bit more difficult. But you can see again, we have the clarinet and the harp this time counting in 6 8. 1 2 3 4 5 6. 1 2 5 6. 1 2 3. So there's my 1 2. 1 2 3 4 5. Now the violin goes 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. At the same time as the harp and the clarinet are going 1 2 3 4 5 6. That's why I haven't got you to do that one, because that one, me counting to 8 would put you off. But you can see that the violin part, you've got notes at the bottom grouped in 4s, 8 notes. So you've actually counting 4 notes in the space of 3, if you think about it. So that makes the 8 notes in the space of 6. It's maths. It's maths, really. A lot of music is maths. So let's just go back to this more straightforward one. That's the one that comes across a huge amount. You see that a lot within the piece, where you've got the 6 8 against the 3 4. And then every now and again, you get the violin part, or whichever instrument part it might be, playing 8 semiquavers in the space of the 6 quavers. So as I say, that looks more complicated and probably is a little bit more complicated, but the principle is the same. And if you're using the worksheet to help you, I've actually, where it's talking about this, I've written it down so that you can see the numbers, exactly how you would count it, to try and make it a little bit more straightforward for you. So it's really well explained on the worksheet. Okay, let's move away from the music again for a second or two, and let's have a look at Mercury, the planet. So Mercury, the planet, I think this is quite, you know, it's amazing really when you find out about Mercury. We've been watching a program on BBC about the planets, and some of it is just amazing. It's fascinating, and the computer generated imagery that you're seeing of the planet's surface, and how inhospitable some of these planets are, it's outstanding. It's amazing. Anyway, let's talk about Mercury. Mercury is the smallest of the planets in the solar system, and it's the nearest to the sun, but it's not, as we discovered last week, the hottest. It's sort of second place in that one. It's only slightly larger than Earth's moon, so it's very small, and the surface temperature can be extremely hot or it can be extremely cold. Daytime temperatures reach about 430 degrees Celsius. But because there's no atmosphere to sort of retain the heat and hold the heat in, temperatures can go as low as minus 180 degrees Celsius. It's the fastest planet orbiting the sun. It only takes 88 Earth days to go round the sun. It travels through space at nearly 29 miles per second. But it spins really slowly on its axis. It takes 59 Earth years to just rotate once, but not every rotation has a sunset and a sunrise due to the way that it orbits. And so one Mercury solar day is equivalent to 176 Earth days. There's no seasons, as it spins almost perfectly upright. There's no moons for it. Its surface actually, and I've got a little model here that was made by my daughter very kindly. Its surface is very similar to the moon's. It's scarred by a lot of impact craters from collisions with meteoroids and comets. And the craters on Mercury are named after deceased artists, authors, musicians, including the children's author Dr. Seuss and the composer Rachmaninoff. Most of the surface appears sort of a greyish brown to our human eye. It may have had water ice at its poles inside deep craters, but it's only in those sort of regions where there's permanent shade that you would find it. And instead of an atmosphere, Mercury has a thin exosphere made up of atoms that blasted off the surface by the solar winds and the striking meteoroids. The exosphere is composed mostly of oxygen, sodium, hydrogen, helium, and potassium. And honestly, if you want to find out more about the planet, go onto the NASA website. It's incredibly informative, and that is exactly where I've got my information from. I would only trust NASA on this. NASA's Mariner 10 was the very first spacecraft to visit Mercury, which was launched in 1973. It was the first craft to be sent to Mercury. It was the first craft to explore 2 planets in a single mission, Mercury and Venus. It was the first to use gravity assistance to change its flight path. It was the first to return to its primary destination for another look. So it was a very important mission. It returned over 2,700 pictures during its 3 Mercury flypaths. And it covered nearly half of the planet's surface. The next one to be sent by NASA was Messenger, which was launched in 2004, and that orbited Mercury for more than 4 years. There is a current mission on. It's a European Space Agency, and JAXA have launched a joint mission, and it was launched in 2018, and it is scheduled to begin orbiting Mercury this year. And it's supposed to operate for about a year. But as we've discovered with a lot of these spacecraft, you know, sometimes they can be sending back signals past that point. So we'll see. The influence of Mercury. Let's think about how Mercury has influenced in so many different ways. Okay, so Mercury lent its name to NASA's first manned space program. There's a chemical element called mercury, which is also known as quicksilver. I wonder where they got that idea from. Would it be somebody with wings on his feet? I don't know about that. But due to its liquid state at room temperature, that's why they call it quicksilver, because it's liquid. The Ford Motor Company's first logo was a profile image of Mercury in his winged helm. Mercury Records, the record label, used the Mercury helm as a logo as well. The god has appeared in sculptures, mosaics, paintings since Roman times. DC comic book character The Flash also references Mercury, his incredible speed. You've got the red costume, the small wings on the side of his forehead and all of that. And Mercury's name is also very often associated with courier services because they're trying to promote fast deliveries. So that idea of Mercury, the Roman god of Mercury, has sort of been used a lot for various different things. So we're pretty much near the end of today's lesson, and I'm amazed we've managed to get it all in, if I'm honest, because there is so much there. But let me give you a suggestion of a couple of activities you could have a go at after today's lesson. And again, these are on the back of the worksheet. So you could have a go at creating your own planet. And let me show you how that you do this. So my daughter's done this. My husband's an artist. He's a junk model maker. So it's his creation. He knows what he's talking about. I'm just following the instructions that he's given. So here we have cardboard. Okay, piece of cardboard cut out into a circle, and we have the cardboard, the grooves in the cardboard going one way. So let's say that these are going vertically, and then there's another piece of cardboard on the back. They've been stuck together, and we'll say that that's horizontal. So those two pieces of cardboard have been put together, they've been glued together, and then they've been reinforced with the masking tape around the edge to hold them together. And then basically you use that piece of cardboard, excuse me, and you build up your moonscape, or could be a moonscape, but in this case, a Mercury scape, by putting on bits of cardboard that you've cut out and sticking them on. There's some masking tape that's been made into like string to form shapes as well for little craters and things like that. And then once you've done that, you cover it in a PVA water tissue mix. So you paint on your PVA and water, you put on your tissue, you then paint over with PVA and water again. And then once it's dry, and it goes very hard, once it's dry, you can paint it to create your planet surface. And actually, you could do this with any of the planets if you wanted to, but we're suggesting this is a good activity for Mercury. So a bit of an arty activity there for you to have a go at this week. Also, you could have a go at playing that repeated idea, that idea that's repeated 12 times at the very beginning there. You could have a go at playing it along with the recording if you learnt how to play it. The music is there on the bottom of the screen, but it is written out on the worksheet as well. And so we really have reached the end of today's lesson. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've got a lot from it. I hope you found out that, you know, the music technology fascinates me. The whole idea of Holst conducting that is just mind-boggling, because, you know, 102 years ago, you just don't expect to hear things from that time in that sort of detail, really. Next week, we have Jupiter, the bringer of jollity. So we will be going back, we will be looking at the gas giants. We're starting to look at the gas giants next week. Hope to see you next week. Have a lovely week. Bye for now.